Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday with the Clear Mountain Monastery community. This evening, we're very happy to have Gregory Kramer with us. Gregory, thank you so much for joining us.
Really lovely to be here.
Okay, so I'll just read a quick bio. So Gregory Kramer is the founder and guiding teacher of the Insight Dialogue community and has been teaching Insight meditation since 1980. He developed the practice of Insight Dialogue and Dharma Contemplation and has been teaching it since 1995, offering retreats in North America, Asia, Europe, and Australia. He has studied with esteemed teachers, including Anagarika Dhammadina, Venerable Balangoda Ananda Maitreya, Achan Sobin Namto, and Venerable Punnaji. Gregory is the author of Insight Dialogue, Seeding the Heart, Dharma Contemplation, and his most recent book, A Whole Life Path. So, Gregory, can you just begin by telling us a bit about how you came to the Dhamma and maybe a bit about some of these teachers? These are all names which I've heard before, but I've certainly never met these teachers and don't know much about them.
Sure. Yeah. So I think like a lot of people, just living life, somehow one gets channeled towards, one feels a pull and doesn't know necessarily what the pull is towards. That I was one of those. And so I knew that awareness really mattered a lot. And then I won't go into the whole story, but I was at actually a yoga, not a yoga, sound yoga retreat in Western Canada. And someone said, we're going up the road to visit a Buddhist nun. Do you want to come? And I said, sure. And I was about maybe 20, 21, something like that. And trundling down the hill of this cabin, and comes Anagarika Dhammadina. And, it's one of those things, I saw there was already something there. And when I spent some time talking to her, I had to come back the next day, even though no one else was going up. I got a ride up there, and she spent time with me. As the sun was setting over the Kootenays, she said, Gregory, you know what your problem is? I said, no, well, what's my problem, Anagarika? It's like, a long list, right? But you don't ask. If you want to know, you have to ask. And so I said, Anagarika, would you teach me how to meditate? Because she would not give the Dhamma unless people asked for it. And she was that way. When Buddha Dhamma, when meditation practice was coming into North America, into the West, a lot of people, of course, wanted to, teachers wanted to get in on it and do things. She was very much like just living a Dhamma life. And anyway, so would not offer teachings without being asked. Anyway, so she then was a channel for my other teachers, who were all monks. Achan Sobin was from Thailand, an esteemed, actually was because of his meditative accomplishments, he was chosen by the king to open a, center in the West. And I studied with him for many years. And Ananda Maitreya, Mahanayaka Thero, was, presided over the Sixth Council. I mean, this guy was really something, and very grateful for working with him. And Punnaji, Venerable Punnaji Maha Thero, Sri Lankan monk. So the sense of entering the Dhamma was the proverbial falling off a log, it just, and more this making it not just make sense, but to really feel the whole of it, not leave anything out because it didn't fit my, the way I was raised or something like that, my views. And that's been wonderful journey for these last, 50 years now. It's 50 years this year. Yeah.
That's actually pretty much in line with Longpa 50th Vasa. So congratulations, Gregory. And you just talked about how you've met him long ago as well. I wanted to ask about, you're known for founding Insight Dialogue, and recently have been kind of articulating this whole realm of relational Dhamma and talking about really leveraging the sensitivity human beings have to one another to amplify mindfulness in the path as a whole. I would like to hear you speak about relational Dhamma as a framework, and maybe just a note is that coming to the West, really feeling a certain isolationist quality or individualist quality to a lot of the Dharma circles, and in some communities being very impressed, for example, with Alcoholics Anonymous, just their ability to a really robust community founded in this, deeply integrated system, and feeling that lack in the Buddhist American emerging culture. So I guess to just lead in, can you articulate what relational Dhamma is, and why did you kind of foreground this in your teaching?
Well, I don't want to convey wrongly that I somehow perceived this need because I was particularly astute and then created this practice. The practice emerged out of my Vipassana work and during my PhD. I got my PhD much later in life, and a partner and I, her name was Terry O'Fallon, were working together, and she was also studying Vipassana with me, and so we were exploring not insight dialogue, just dialogue, but because we were both, talking about and practicing in meditative exploration, those two explorations came together, and the early version of, or some manifestation of insight dialogue came up out of that. But it was nothing like the practice is today. I mean, really, that I shouldn't say nothing. It had a kernel of mindfulness in dialogue. And that's so important that it's not nothing. But what I mean is the guidelines were all different. The form of the practice was different. That all emerged after I had finished my PhD and started going around teaching it. And the reason I need to say that first is because a relational understanding of the Dhamma emerged because I was engaged and teaching quite sincere and in some ways rigorous meditation retreats, right? So the retreats are all in silence except when you're in dialogue, for example. And it was early morning till night. And, all the features of more or less traditional Vipassana retreats, right? But then gradually introducing the meditation instructions by way of some guidelines and practicing those with the Dhamma aspect is what you talk about, which is not talking about it. You're pausing and naming experience. But that experience, like if your framework is, let's say, dana, giving, what is your experience of it? And you pause, you say, what is it really? Or if you're exploring the hindrances, and maybe in particular doubt, and you pause and you say, what am I noticing now of faith or doubt as a real experience, right? But then when you work directly with something like the factors of awakening, It's like, well, what's the quality of mindfulness or investigation, energy, joy, and so on. And then you can see instantly how if I'm practicing sati, if I'm developing mindfulness, and you are, and we're both in there in this moment, with the agreement, we're meditating together, and we're specifically exploring the experience of sati here and now. So whatever I'm experiencing of mindfulness, I might speak to it. You hear me do that, you see me do that, and you're looking at your own sati, and you notice, wow, it comes up, it actually brightens, like here and now. If I pause with you two friends and we say, how is sati right now? Right? And it's never far away, right? So, but that brings it like explicitly here. And now we're beginning to engage in this reflective process that sustains and amplifies the sati. And so it is within, investigation of states, Dhamma-Vijaya, and energy, and so on, and even samadhi. So all of that began to emerge from the experience itself. It wasn't like I was abstractly saying, what if I look at, what's relational about samadhi or something? It wasn't like that at all. It was like, what's happening in the world? And I was, traveling all over the world, teaching almost constantly. I could never do it now. So that was, so anyway, to get back to your question, Bhante. Here's the thing. Human beings are intrinsically relational. I mean, we are social animals, structures in the brain, hormones, particular, all kinds of evolved sensitivities and capacities that are just part of how we're built. Now we're also intrinsically individual. Like we can meditate till the cows come home, and I still will never know your subjective world fully. It's not going to happen. However, this intrinsic relatedness absolutely demands, to me anyway, after being with it a lot, I can no longer, it's not subtle anymore for me. It's like, well, if human beings are intrinsically relational, which is like a scientific fact, but it's also experiential, and the Dhamma is about the human experience, suffering and the end of suffering, then it must, to reflect this experience, it must also be as intrinsically relational as it is intrinsically individual. It can't reflect the human experience otherwise. And then you just say, how? Well, then you're just saying, what is going on here? So that's the, like for a whole path, for a living sense of the path and the beauty of Sangha, of spiritual friendship. I mean, it's no secret that the Buddha said spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life, right? So why did he say that? If you really take that seriously, if you don't think the Buddha is messing about with us, why did he say that?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, and something that I've appreciated about your teachings is how much you bring your teachings back to the suttas, teaching so much from the suttas. And when I first heard this term relational Dhamma, while it's very true that there is this teaching that spiritual friendship, Kalyanamitta, is the whole of the holy life, there's also all these suttas that bring up the benefits of seclusion, of viveka. And that was when I first started hearing your teachings, I was like wondering, what would Gregory say about seclusion and all of the encouragement, the qualities of which you may know, this is the Dhamma, this is the Vinaya, this is the teacher's instruction. One of those is seclusion, and that entangledness is not the Dhamma, not the Vinaya, not the teacher's instruction. But you do talk to this, and you use this term, the individual relational paradox, I think, in relation to this concept. Could you speak more about that term? And yeah, how do you understand this balance between spiritual friendship as the whole of the holy life, but also seclusion and viveka are a huge part of the holy life as well?
Absolutely. So, okay, so my focus on relational Dhamma, emerging as it does from experience, from practice, from teaching, insight dialogue, and then looking at my own life, and the lives of the people that I'm encountering as I teach. Okay, so the power of relational practice has become really clear. So there's no sense of doubt about that. But I always had this, I have a deep, deep respect for the canon, for the core teachings, for the Nikayas, and so I've never let that question out of mind. And yes, we are intrinsically individual, but that doesn't really answer it for me. Well, the real answer is that I find most satisfying, I guess, is what I'm saying. Not speaking truth, but it seems most helpful, is we are whole beings, and our practice needs to reflect that. So we, in my view anyway, must have a dedication to immersion in individual silent practice. This is not an either or. This is not a replacement of anything. That is core. And there's things that I see when I go on long silent retreat that I don't see in insight dialogue. When the mind gets very still and is still bright and aware, and there's enough equanimity to allow what needs to happen. There's a subtlety of dissolution, of letting go, of anatta, and so on, that is unique to those conditions. Absolutely, absolutely, no doubt about it. However, it is also true that when two or more, I'll just speak two because it's easier, right? When two people are meditating together, and the samadhi grows, and the sati, the mindfulness, is still good, still strong and steady, and the mind is bright, and you've been in practice long enough that these qualities are established, right? This is not, oh, I'm aware that I'm talking or something. This is, and the pauses are getting longer, and there's observing internally, externally, and both, which is satipatthana straight up, And in such moments, the self becomes thinner, and as in individual practice, the sense of self, of I am talking, or I am with you, or any of that dissolves. And yet here you are still, and this other person you're with, I'm assuming right now that this is going to be met. It's another conversation when one person is well established and the other isn't. Good practice, necessary practice. It's like the real world. But when awareness meets awareness, the conditions are set for a quality of relational insight, which there's various ways one could speak about it. One is not self in relation, which is obviously, we're back to that paradox, right? Another is what I call unconstructed intimacy. So, when sati and samadhi are strong, a bare sensory experience can have the quality of a deep intimacy with the world. It doesn't have to be something as elaborate as a tree. Once it happened with my glass of juice at a retreat center. It's like, just like that nothing in between, nothing else kind of experience. When that same quality arises with another human being, it has that same sense of immediacy, of intimacy, but it's not an intimacy that is constructed out of personal history. It happens right there. You don't even know the person's name. You certainly don't know their life story. And yet, the quality of the shared human experience can be profound. So you then recognize that that's a capacity that we all have. Like, you begin to become sensitized to the brightness, the subjectivity, the quality of awareness of another as if it's your own. And that's transformative, actually. It's beautiful.
I'm, I have been struck by a sense almost of the sacred emerging between two people. It's the unconstructed intimacy seems to speak to that, as does the paradigm of I and thou, which is, a Western philosophical paradigm as well. And I do really appreciate how you have drawn out this relational framework in a way that I think is deeply needed in the West. And speaking of you grounding things in the Tripitaka, you actually gifted our first Tripitaka to Clear Mountain. We have it in our attic for when we actually have a monastery. So, but I really want to ground this. I think people will agree with much of what you said, but to really ground this relational paradigm in kind of practicable steps for our viewers, something that you could almost take into the new year as a determination, for example. But and I know that might be most easily done through insight dialogue. But for example, if someone really wants to cultivate this relational Dhamma, would you suggest they just engage in kind of a shared insight dialogue meditation experience with a Kalyanamitta, kind of moving through these conversations with one another? Or can people bring it into their daily lives in a way that's very kind of practical and maybe distinct from just a normal nonviolent communication framework of sort of pause, be mindful? How do you suggest very practically people bring this into their lives?
Yeah, and also describing maybe what is insight dialogue for people who don't know what that is.
Okay, sure. So in insight dialogue as such, you're, developing a practice the way, certain meditation practices have actual subtleties or techniques or whatever, and some don't maybe. But with insight dialogue, given that you're undertaking the rather audacious project of cultivating vipassana with speech and with the complexity of being in relationship with another person or in contact with another person, there's a reason for those guidelines. So I'm not sure. Okay, so just to describe the practice quickly, and then go to your question, Bhante. Could be a large group or a small group. Again, it's just so much easier to describe just two people in practice, 2 or 3 or whatever. So over a period of time, maybe it's once a week, you go to a group, or you're in retreat, and this is the first couple of days of retreat, you actually practice pausing. You practice it because you would be, it's so sweet. Humans are so sweet. You would be shocked at how hard it is for people to pause while they're speaking. It's like a ballistic missile. Once you shoot it off, wherever it goes, it goes. And that's how speech usually is. So pausing is a radical thing. But when you pause, what's going on? It's like you say, lots of practices would call for a pause. But what are you doing? And that's where, Mindfulness is established internally, externally, and both, and you practice that. That's the guideline open. Mindfulness is established rising and vanishing, and the rising and vanishing, that's attuned to emergence, attuned to anicca. It's a practice. You work on it, you develop it, but it becomes natural because it's all impermanent right now, right? Here we are doing this thing. I'm moving my hands. Everything's shimmering and vibrating. We just forget about it when we chunk it up into Gregory and you guys, and but really, you stop and the meditative qualities are right here. But it's harder to do in relationship until you've had a lot, some practice. So you learn these guidelines and you actually engage them. And again, you might learn them once a week over multiple weeks or at a retreat or whatever. And here's a key piece. When we're going to speak, we are investigating present moment experience using the framework of the Buddha Dhamma. So, it's like the 10 topics of conversation from the suttas, only it's really all of the suttas. And talk about a sutta basis for this stuff. You folks probably know these discourses as well as I do, but there's just countless discourses on, speaking, and it's teaching the Dhamma is actually practice and all this there's just a million examples, but when you do that in meditation and you bring the power of meditation, the meditative qualities, you bring the power of the Dhamma, and you bring the power of relationship all together. That's what I call the three bases of insight dialogue: relationship, Dhamma or wisdom, and meditative qualities, and all of those powers synergize, and that's the nature of it. So, just quickly to get to your question, if you begin to get curious about the awareness in the other, just as you're curious about your own awareness, it's like, can I really see you in your as a subjective universe? Can I really perceive that quality of awareness or the way it manifests? Obviously, I can't know your awareness, but I can get closer. I know mine. Your sensitivity is here, and attune to that kind of beautiful subtlety of the other being in the same way, and then recognize that this mind, this heart is knowing that. And then you begin to get closer to something that can be noticeable anytime. Yeah. I didn't actually get to something that you asked very pointedly, Ajahn, about seclusion. And this is a good time to go just one little step further. So seclusion can include, of course, seclusion from other people. And classically, it's also the deeper seclusion is the seclusion of the senses, the seclusion of the mind. And, the Buddha said, the one who can be surrounded by people and not falling into all, into all the delights, that's the person who's secluded. Someone who's out in the woods but completely, pulled away all the time, that's not seclusion. So there's a kind of a technical, clever little thing you can do. But I think much more interesting is the acknowledgement that, the kind of the rapture born of seclusion is a thing, and it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. And the beauty and power that comes from relational practice is also a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm.
Gregory, I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about any insights that you may have had into social anxiety. I would imagine that through decades of slowing down communication, actively practicing pausing, you would have insights into your own and other people's social anxiety. And it's such a big thing these days, is people are more and more online and just forgetting how to actually communicate. And so what practical insights have you had into the process of social anxiety, and what practical things can people do to maybe short circuit that?
Yeah. And I hope you don't mind that I bring it right into the kind of core Dhamma, that is dukkha. That's, that is suffering. That is pain. That is, it's dukkha, it's sankhara dukkha. It's, it's all the forms of dukkha right there. But look at it. Look at how sensitive we are. I'm looking at your two faces, and like so much of me responds, And whether you like it or know it or attune to it or not, you're doing the same with me, We're made to do that. But what happens is we're also living in an imperfect world, and we get hurt. And those hurts registers, sankhara, kama, all ways of talking about what's actually going on that makes us so complex. And, I see those eyes, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, they might be looking at me, and, or what do they think of me? We're born to do this, but then if that same urge gets kind of torqued, twisted by our fears, our, difficult experiences, and so on. So a couple of things I could say that might be hopeful. One of them is it doesn't have to be that way. The same way that dukkha has an ending, and it's driven by craving, by tanha, and held in place by ignorance, so is this relational dukkha. There's no difference. And so as long as you're not looking at it and you're not aware of it, what's going to happen? The ignorance just allows the whole thing to go on. And we're flooded all the time, and we're hurt all the time. And some of us get so flooded that we have anti-anxiety drugs. I've had people come to ID retreat who were on, medication for social anxiety. And I mean, I can't, it's not like, someone's going to drop their crutches and say, I'm healed, but I've seen it happen. I mean, this individual I'm thinking of right now left retreat and wasn't needing those drugs to be like in what would cause anxiety in most normal meaning closed off and hurt and scared people, right? So there's extreme anxiety, and it would be foolish for me to say that sometimes people come to an ID retreat and it's a lot, and we try to establish conditions of great kindness and sufficient flexibility. When I started teaching, I didn't know that. I just wanted people to get the beauty of this practice, to get the power of the practice, and like go. But I wasn't as attuned as I'm more attuned now to how hard it can be for a lot of people. And because you have a return to mindfulness established internally, and the body, we teach a lot of body awareness in Insight Dialogue, and so you pause and you have some grounding, regrounding. And so you're beginning to, in the technical terms, titrate the social contact and the grounding, and it becomes more tolerable. You find that it is met, you are met. You're met with awareness and kindness. You listen like you've never listened, but you also are listened to like you've never been listened to. And not by a sage on a stage. This is your peers. The peer-to-peer learning in Insight Dialogue is just so inspiring. It's not like, one of the three of us have to be up there giving Dhamma talks for people to be learning Dhamma. They're getting it, like right there. You give them a contemplation, and now the person who's speaking to their own, let's say, craving to be seen, the bhava tanha, I want to exist, and by you looking at me, I exist. And it's like, oh, wow, that's a powerful contemplation. But then, pausing and here your meditation partner, not some teacher, right, is saying, yeah, I'm seeing that I've been doing that my whole life. It's like trying to impress people. And they pause because they didn't really want to say that, but now they've said it, and they pause. And they begin to settle down into that. And it's like, to some extent, I'm doing that with you now. Maybe I'm trying to look like a good meditator with you. And so this person who's themselves maybe has some anxiety about being authentic or just sitting in front of someone, you see, oh, wow, that's a human being. And they're hurting just like me, and it's okay. And, things change because you can experience something quite different.
I'm struck by, out of the 8 worldly winds, 4 of them, half are to do with interpersonal suffering and pleasure, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. And just the Buddha singling out this is just an unbelievably potent part of our experience and wounding. And I think you drawing it out, that is where so many of our sufferings lie. And just hearing you talk about it, really, it just is cathartic, honestly. We might actually keep you on for even a few more minutes than we had thought, so people can put questions into the chat, but we have a few more ourselves. One is, I'm hearing practical steps people can take out of this conversation include pausing and really making much of that, titrating conversation with coming into the body. And I'm curious if you'd have one more for people coming out. But my real question, sorry, we're back. My real question, because I feel like getting 2 in, is, I wanted, you've written a book for children in cultivating loving kindness. And I find, bringing these relational frameworks down into very particular and very potent relationships is interesting. So I'm curious if you had any advice for yourself as a younger parent, for your younger self as a parent, in terms of being a good practitioner, parent for your children, for all those listening, what would that advice be?
So maybe I'll address the second one first, since you just asked it, and then maybe I'll go back.
I stuck into.
Yeah. I was really pleased that I had 3 sons. They're now between the ages of 37 and 45. And all through their childhood, I would share with them every night metta practice. And, it was part of a routine. I also would make up a pretty long story for them. And I would, after we were done with the metta, I would just lie there and just be with them. No words, no nothing. So it was part of a context, right? And so that kind of consistency of something that you feel as a parent is genuine for you, it's inspiring, it's beautiful. Not, I should do this for my kids, but this is really, this means something to me, and I want you to have this somewhere in your heart as you go through life, right? Mm-hmm. But there's also the piece of in our not just secular world, but very pressured world. And it's like, how comfortable are we introducing something that might be interpreted as religious or something, some kind of imposition. And I tried not to do that and succeeded. My kids, none of them rejected this stuff because it was forced on them or anything like that. And, but at the same time, I can't help but wonder if, this is me speaking to my younger me. That's what you asked me for. It's like, could I have found some other reference points in addition to our metta practice, and in addition to just, monks would come visit me, and and I would go off on retreat or teach retreat or whatever. So they got all that. But what I see working in all these other world religions, not just to promulgate a religion. I'm talking about doing real good work of love, work of safety, of care for other people. Is like, we've become devoid of ritual and devoid of holiness. And, you mentioned I, thou earlier. I absolutely love Martin Buber, and I'm rereading I and Thou right now. I've read it many times. And, one thing we do have, and I think this is something that many young parents are getting, and I guess I just want to really support that, is our religion, something that really touches wonder and awe and beauty and vastness and the unknowable, is nature, right? The natural world, and especially, I guess this is quite strong, you see in the Northwest, where all of our trees and our mountains and all that, but everybody gets that. That's not confined to a region or a people or anything. I think maybe being conscious of that awe, of that wonder with the kids, and maybe not being afraid to speak of it, like let it be as explicit as your heart calls you to be. Not don't try to fabricate it. They'll see right through it, so something like that comes to mind. And I know your time is tight, so I won't go back to your first question unless you tell me to.
I would like it just briefly, if you have time. We're going to stretch your live stream out another few minutes, if that's all right. So we'll jump onto Zoom after we get you a little longer.
Suits you, yeah. Well, yeah, I would say something that I find enormously helpful is the Dhamma as a living part of my own life, so that there are aspects of the teachings that I contemplate, that I think about, and that I get very curious about, and I want to observe in my own experience. And when stuff comes up that's difficult, and I mean, from the little ones to the really important stuff, like, death and depression or despair or argument or any of that, all of it. What is, so a contemplation, like we just did a moment ago, might be, what am I hungering for? Or what is dukkha? What is my experience now? Why is this suffering? Or what's my experience of suffering? What is sati? What is my inward eye, my body eye, my heart? Tell me about this experience now. What is suffering here? But my contemplation might be on the aggregates. It might be something that sounds abstract and geeky, but it's not. It's like, really look. It's like, oh, wow, perceiving, and I try to understand what is perception. And I'll go around with that question just like all the time, And but they can also be much more, you might say, earthy. like things from the Saleka Sutta about, where am I being conniving? Or where am I genuine and honest? And just leave it at that question. Whatever you touch in the teachings, just carry it with you. Volition, intention. These are deep, deep teachings, but really accessible. And if we just let them be with us, I would say that's something, and when you're with your friends, it's a lot easier. If you've got, hey, how'd you do today with intention? Oh man, I really blew it. I was like totally driven by sense desire all day. Okay, kind. Then you're aware of it, and you've got a colleague who's with you in that. So spiritual friendship is good.
And maybe just going to one of our questions here. And it's a question that I actually don't understand, but did your practice of nada yoga involving sound, and I don't know what that is, influence your interest in work in data sonification? So yeah, I'd love to hear your response on that.
Of weaving threads, thank you. So for those who don't know, data sonification it's a way of perceptualizing data. So the way you have data visualization, you have graphs and animations of, all kinds of data. Charts are a simple visualization. You can also have, let's say, data sets and use those data sets, for example, to control a synthesizer, and then you're listening to the variations in the data. That's a pretty condensed version. And I produced the first book in that field and created the conference in that field and stuff. So back in my early days. So the connection for me is obviously I've always been involved in listening because I'm a composer, I'm a musician. I've always been involved in listening and fascinated by sound. But going a level deeper that connects it to mostly what we're talking about tonight is being a musician was always about awareness to me. It was about a kind of an authenticity of being in the moment and process, not product, and all that kind of thing. And so sonification grew out of my involvement in music, and I was an electronic music composer and so on. And that way of listening and finding a way of being intimate with the data through sound. So the connection then is being aware of, as the data, changes in the data represented by changes in the sound, touches you, and what patterns or what qualities or what facets of the data do you perceive. And that's a process of, if you don't have mindfulness of some sort, you won't get it. So that's all kind of how I would tie that all together.
Thank you, Gregory. And we do have to wrap things up now, but we will be moving on to Zoom. For those who are interested, we're going to paste the link into the chat. If you don't see it there, you can see it in the YouTube description or go to clearmountainmonastery.org, and it's under the Wednesday event listing. We might even get to hear what type of juice Gregory had a kind of special moment with. But we really do look forward to getting a chance to speak more. And just to say, it's January 1st, the new year, but kind of getting to begin this new year with a discussion about something so kind of meaningful and not addressed often enough feels appropriate. And thank you for drawing this kind of note out of the Dhamma for the sake of all of us, just this realm where so many of us have suffering and happiness and holiness as well.
And also just doing such work in seeding the Dhamma here in the Pacific Northwest. So,
well, it's been fun being with you. It's been good. Good to enter into the teachings together.
Thank you.